Day 14 of the battle brought the final confrontation. The Ravager fleet had assembled everything they had, determined to crush the resistance once and for all. 45 warships formed up in perfect battle formation, preparing to overwhelm Cathara through pure force. But they were no longer facing 5 desperate human ships. The Coalition fleet numbered over 60 vessels now. Merchant ships retrofitted with weapons, science vessels providing tactical support, medical ships ready to treat casualties, and at the center, the battered but unbroken human frigates. Captain Hana stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, which had been patched together with Catharan technology and human determination. Half her crew was wounded. The ship was operating on backup systems, but her eyes were clear and focused as she addressed the Coalition fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Hana. 2 weeks ago, humanity arrived here alone to help strangers. Today we stand together as allies. The Ravagers think they can intimidate us with numbers. They're about to learn that courage counts more than ships. Stay close to your wingmates. Watch each other's backs and remember why we're fighting. For Cathara, for justice, for the principle that the strong protect the weak. All ships, engage at will." The fleets crashed together in a massive battle that would be remembered for generations. The Ravagers fought with their traditional tactics, relying on heavy weapons and rigid formations. But the Coalition had learned from human example. They fought with creativity, aggression, and coordination. Commander Jiho led his fighter wing in a daring strike against the Ravager flagship. His pilots flew in patterns that seemed chaotic but were actually carefully coordinated. They drew enemy fire away from the larger ships, creating openings for devastating attacks. The merchant ships, commanded by Captain Vornis, proved surprisingly effective. They lacked military weapons, but they had powerful industrial equipment. Mining lasers designed to cut asteroids worked just as well on Ravager hulls. Cargo holds emptied their contents into enemy flight paths, creating obstacles and confusion. Bora coordinated the Coalition defense with tactical brilliance, directing ships where they were needed most. She had learned to think like the Ravagers, predicting their moves and countering them before they could be executed. What had started as human tactics had evolved into something new. A fusion of human creativity and galactic knowledge. On Cathara below, Taman watched the battle from the Planetary Defense Center. Beside him, Catharan military commanders directed ground forces. The planet's population had been evacuated to shelters, but everyone watched the feeds from orbit. Their fate was being decided in the darkness above. "They're holding," one commander said in amazement. "The Coalition is actually holding against the Ravager fleet." Taman felt pride swell in his chest. 2 weeks ago, his people had been ready to surrender. Now they fought alongside humans and dozens of other species, united by something stronger than military alliances. They were united by shared values, by the belief that some things were worth fighting for. The battle raged for 8 hours. Ships on both sides were destroyed or disabled. The space around Cathara became a graveyard of metal and flame. But slowly, inevitably, the tide turned. The Ravagers had never encountered resistance like this. Their rigid tactics couldn't adapt to the Coalition's fluid fighting style. When their flagship finally exploded, destroyed by a combined strike from human, Catharan, and merchant vessels, the remaining Ravager ships broke formation. For the first time in their military history, they retreated, not in an organized withdrawal, but in panicked flight. The Coalition fleet didn't pursue. They were too damaged, too exhausted. Instead, they held position around Cathara, protecting the planet they had fought so hard to save. On the horizon's edge, Captain Hana allowed herself a moment of relief. They had won. Against impossible odds with allies they hadn't known existed 2 weeks ago, they had won. The price had been high. 3 of the original 5 human ships were destroyed. Hundreds of crew members were dead or wounded. But Cathara survived. "Captain," Bora said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They want to speak with you." Hana straightened her uniform and nodded. The council chamber appeared on her screen, filled with representatives from across the galaxy. The head counselor looked uncomfortable but sincere as he spoke. "Captain Hana, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I wish to express our gratitude for your actions at Cathara. Your courage has been an inspiration to the entire galaxy. We would like to discuss compensation for your losses and formal recognition of Earth's role in this conflict. Hana was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Counselor, with respect, we didn't come here for compensation or recognition. We came because people needed help. That's all the reason humanity needs. The counselor seemed confused. But surely you expect some form of payment or territorial concessions. You saved an entire world. We expect nothing, Hana replied firmly. If you want to honor our sacrifice, protect others who cannot protect themselves. Don't let another world send unanswered distress calls. That's the only payment we need. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some delegates seemed shocked by the response. Others appeared thoughtful. The head counselor finally spoke again. Captain, the council would like to offer Earth a position in our military command structure. Your tactical innovations could be invaluable in defending. We respectfully decline, Hana interrupted. Earth will not be mercenaries for hire. But we will answer distress calls, always. Any world under attack can count on human assistance. Not because of treaties or payment, because it's the right thing to do. Ambassador Kyung appeared on screen beside Hana. He had arrived from Earth specifically for this moment. The Council should understand something about humanity. We believe that with power comes responsibility. Earth has joined the galactic community, and we take that responsibility seriously. We will defend those who cannot defend themselves. We will stand against bullies and tyrants, not for profit or territory, because our values demand it. The transmission ended, leaving the council to debate among themselves. Hana didn't care about their response. She had said what needed to be said. Earth's position was clear. Taman came aboard the Horizon's Edge for the last time. The human ships would be leaving soon, returning to Earth for repairs and rest. He found Captain Hana in the observation deck, looking at Cathara below. The planet's cities were damaged but intact. Its people were alive. All because 5 human ships had refused to ignore a distress call. I wanted to thank you, Taman said, for everything. You saved my world. We helped, Hana corrected gently. But your people saved themselves. You fought back. You found your courage. We just reminded you it was there. Taman smiled. That's very human of you, giving credit to others. He paused, then asked the question that had been bothering him. What will you do now, go back to Earth and rest? Hana pulled up a star map on her datapad. Red markers indicated worlds currently under threat or attack. There were dozens of them. We'll rest briefly, repair our ships, then we'll respond to these distress calls. Someone has to. All of them? Taman asked in disbelief. You can't save the entire galaxy. Maybe not, Hana admitted. But we can try. And maybe our example will inspire others the way it inspired the coalition here. Change doesn't happen all at once. It starts with one person, one ship, one world deciding to do the right thing. Bora joined them at the observation window. She had been monitoring galactic communications. Captain, you should see this. There are reports coming in from across the galaxy. Other species are starting to answer distress calls. Ships that would have ignored pleas for help are now responding. It's spreading. Hana felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel. Hope for the future. Not just for humanity or Cathara, but for the entire galactic community. Good, she said simply. That's how it should be. On Earth, news of the Battle of Cathara had spread quickly. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most human way possible. Not through conquest or trade, but through compassion and sacrifice. The population celebrated their heroes, but they also understood the responsibility that came with this new reputation. Earth began building more ships, not for conquest, but for rescue. Training more crews, not for war, but for humanitarian missions. Humans were preparing to take their place as protectors of the weak, defenders of the innocent. It was a role they had been preparing for throughout their violent history without realizing it. Back on Cathara, the reconstruction had begun. Buildings were being repaired. Families were reuniting. Life was slowly returning to normal, but something had changed. The Catharan people now knew they weren't alone in the universe. They had allies who would fight for them, not because of treaties, but because it was right. A permanent memorial was erected in the capital city. It showed 5 human ships arriving at Cathara, with the inscription, "No one came to save us." But humans below that, a second line was added, "And they taught us how to save ourselves." Teeman stood before the memorial on the day of its dedication. Thousands of Catharans had gathered to honor their fallen defenders. Human and alien names were carved into the stone together. United in sacrifice, a young Catharan girl approached Teeman. He recognized her as the child Dr. Daehyun had treated in the medical bay. He broadcast started on day 5 of the battle. Communications officer Sora had an idea that changed everything. She began transmitting live footage of the fighting to the Galactic Network. No commentary, no propaganda. Just raw footage of what was happening at Cathara. Across thousands of worlds, billions of beings watched humans fighting impossible odds. They saw Captain Hana coordinating defense from a damaged bridge. They saw Commander Jiho's fighters diving through enemy fire to protect civilians. They saw Dr. Daehyun treating wounded Catharans with the same care he gave his own species. Most importantly, they saw humans dying for strangers. The footage went viral within hours. News networks picked it up. Social platforms exploded with discussion. For the first time in galactic history, people were watching a species fight not for territory or resources, but purely to save others. On the industrial world of Makara, a merchant captain named Vornis watched the broadcasts in his ready room. He had been one of 17 civilizations that ignored Cathara's initial distress call. At the time, it had seemed like a reasonable business decision. Military intervention was expensive and dangerous. But watching humans fight for people they had never met, Vornis felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Shame. He called his crew together and made an announcement. "Change course," Vornis ordered. "We're going to Cathara. Load the cargo hold with medical supplies and food. We may not be warriors, but we can help." His crew stared at him in surprise. "But sir, we'll lose money on that cargo, and the journey is dangerous." "I know," Vornis said quietly, "but I'm tired of counting profit while others count bodies. If humans can risk their lives for strangers, we can risk our cargo." He wasn't alone. Across the galaxy, others were making similar decisions. A science vessel from the Talarian Consortium diverted to Cathara, offering their advanced sensors to help coordinate defense. A medical ship from the Healing Order arrived with trauma specialists. Individual ships, small groups, volunteers who had been shamed into action by human courage. They didn't come because of orders or treaties. They came because they had watched humans fight and couldn't live with themselves if they did nothing. On the horizon's edge, Teeman reported the new arrivals to Captain Hana. She studied the list of incoming ships with cautious hope. It wasn't much, a few dozen vessels against the Ravager fleet. But it was something. "They're coming because of you," Teeman said. "Because they saw what humans were willing to do." Hana shook her head. "They're coming because it's the right thing to do. We just reminded them of that." Bora approached with new tactical data. "Captain, we have a problem. The Ravagers have called in reinforcements. Their fleet now numbers 45 ships. Even with the new arrivals, we're still badly outnumbered." "Then we'll have to be smarter," Hana said. "Coordinate with the new arrivals. Find out what capabilities they have. And get me a direct line to Yuna." Pilot Yuna was humanity's best shuttle operator, known for flying missions others considered impossible. She had already completed 3 rescue runs into enemy territory. Each time, she had brought back civilians against overwhelming odds. "You called, Captain?" Yuna's voice came over the communication system. "I have a mission for you," Hana said. "There's a refugee camp behind enemy lines. 5,000 Catharans trapped with no way out. The Ravagers are moving forces toward it. We need to evacuate them before it's too late." Yuna was quiet for a moment. "Captain, that's deep in Ravager territory. I'd need to make multiple trips. The chances of getting everyone out are slim. The chances of surviving even one trip are not good." "I know," Hana said quietly. "I'm not ordering you to go. I'm asking if you can do it." Of course I can do it, Yuna replied immediately. Give me the coordinates, I'll bring them home. Yuna launched 30 minutes later in a heavy transport shuttle. She flew low over Cathara's surface using terrain to hide from Ravager sensors. Other human pilots volunteered to accompany her, flying escort in damaged fighters. The first trip went smoothly. Yuna loaded 800 refugees and made it back to orbit without incident. The second trip was harder. Ravager patrols had increased. She had to dodge enemy fire while landing, but she got another group out. By the fourth trip, the Ravagers had figured out what she was doing. They sent interceptors to stop her. Yuna's escort fighters engaged them, buying her time to land and load refugees. In the sky above, human pilots fought desperately to protect the transport. Yuna loaded the last group of refugees and began her ascent. But a Ravager cruiser had positioned itself directly in her flight path. There was no way around it. The cruiser powered weapons, preparing to fire. All escort fighters break off, Yuna transmitted calmly. Save yourselves. I'll find another way. But the fighters didn't break off. Instead, they formed up around her transport, creating a shield with their own bodies. When the Ravager cruiser fired, the fighters took the hits meant for the transport. 3 were destroyed instantly. The others were badly damaged, but Yuna's transport made it through. She reached orbit with all 5,000 refugees aboard her various trips. The cost was 11 human fighters destroyed and 14 pilots dead or wounded. The survivors didn't complain. They had saved 5,000 lives. Bora watched the transport dock and turned to Hana with a troubled expression. Captain, we just traded ships and pilots for civilians. By any military calculation, that was a bad trade. By military calculations, maybe, Hana replied. But we're not just military. Those 5,000 people are alive because our pilots were willing to pay the price. That's not a bad trade. That's what makes us human. Taemin overheard the conversation and felt something shift in his understanding. The galactic civilizations calculated value in terms of resources and strategic advantage. Humans calculated value in terms of lives saved. It was a completely different way of thinking. Across the galaxy, more species were watching and learning. The broadcasts continued to spread. People saw Yuna's impossible rescue. They saw the fighter pilots sacrificing themselves to protect refugees. They saw human engineers working 20-hour shifts to keep damaged ships flying. Public opinion began to shift. On dozens of worlds, citizens demanded their government send help to Cathara. Politicians who had refused now faced angry voters. Military commanders who had cited regulations now faced questions about their values. The Galactic Council reconvened, this time with the public watching every moment. The head counselor looked uncomfortable as he addressed the assembly. The situation at Cathara has garnered significant public attention, the counselor said carefully. Perhaps we should reconsider our previous decision regarding military intervention. A delegate from the Vorlon Empire stood. This was the same empire that had rejected Taemin's plea for help. The humans have shown us something we had forgotten: compassion, courage, the willingness to sacrifice for others. I move that we authorize immediate military support for Cathara. The vote was unanimous, but by then it hardly mattered. The coalition forming around Cathara wasn't waiting for council approval. Ships continued to arrive from across the galaxy. Some brought weapons, others brought supplies. All of them brought hope. On Cathara's surface, the resistance had grown into a full military force. Civilians who had fled now returned to fight. Scientists shared their knowledge freely with the human engineers. Nari worked alongside Catharan technicians, combining human ingenuity with Catharan technology to create new weapons. Your species is remarkable, one Catharan engineer told Nari. You've been in space for only a few years, yet you fight like you've been doing it for centuries. Nari laughed darkly. We have been doing it for centuries, just not in space. Humans have been fighting since before we had language. We've gotten very good at it. The Catharan engineer looked troubled. That sounds like a violent history. It is, Nari admitted. We've done terrible things to each other, but we've also learned from our mistakes. We learned that the strong should protect the weak, that justice matters more than victory. that some things are worth fighting for. She gestured to the weapon they were building. Now we're using everything we learned to protect your people. That's what makes the difference. Communication Officer. Sora continued her broadcasts, now showing not just humans but the growing coalition. The galaxy watched as different species worked together, united by human example. Merchant ships delivering supplies, medical teams treating wounded, engineers building defenses. It was the largest volunteer force in galactic history, and it had been inspired by 5 small human ships that refused to let strangers die alone. On the horizon's edge, Captain Hana received a message from Earth. The transmission was from Fleet Command, acknowledging her actions. She expected a reprimand for exceeding her authority. Instead, the Admiral simply said, "You've made us proud. Keep fighting." Hana felt a wave of emotion she rarely allowed herself. Pride in her crew, hope for Cathara, and something else. A sense that humanity had just announced itself to the galaxy, not with weapons or technology, but with something far more powerful. Compassion backed by courage, idealism proven through action, the simple human belief that every life mattered, demonstrated in blood and sacrifice. The galaxy was watching, and for the first time in a long time, it was learning what it meant to be truly civilized. 3 days had passed since the first battle. The Ravagers had regrouped and attacked again with greater force. The human fleet had fought them to a standstill, but the cost was heavy. 2 human ships were gone, destroyed in desperate fighting. The horizon's edge had taken serious damage. Hull breaches covered 3 decks. The shields were operating at 40% capacity. Captain Hana walked through the damaged sections of her ship, observing the repair crews working around the clock. Sparks flew from welding torches. The smell of burnt metal filled the air. Every face she passed looked exhausted, but no one complained. No one asked to retreat. In the medical bay, Dr. Daehyun moved between beds with practiced efficiency. Half the patients were human Marines wounded in boarding actions. The other half were Catharan civilians injured in the bombardment. Daehyun treated them all with equal care, working past the point of exhaustion. Taemin had come aboard the horizon's edge to coordinate defense strategies. Now he stood in the medical bay, watching the human doctor work. A young Catharan girl lay on one of the beds, her arm badly burned. Daehyun carefully cleaned and bandaged the wound, speaking softly to calm her fears. "Does it hurt?" the girl asked in broken galactic common. "A little," Daehyun admitted. "But you're very brave. Much braver than I was at your age," the girl smiled weakly. "Are you really from Earth?" "I am," Daehyun confirmed. "Why did you come here?" the girl asked. "We're not your people." Daehyun paused in his work, considering the question. "On Earth, we have an old saying. We're all brothers and sisters under the same sky. You may not be human, but you're people. That's enough." Taemin felt something twist in his chest. He had spent his entire career studying galactic civilizations, learning their cultures and values. Most species operated on clear principles of self-interest and calculated exchange. You helped others when it benefited you. You formed alliances for mutual advantage. The idea of helping someone simply because they needed help was almost alien to galactic thinking. But humans seemed to genuinely believe it. Later, Taemin found Captain Hana on the bridge, studying tactical displays with Bora. The Ravagers had pulled back again, but everyone knew they would return. Each attack was stronger than the last. "Captain," Taemin said quietly, "may I ask you something?" Hana looked up from her work. "Of course. Why are you still here?" "You could retreat. No one would blame you." "You've already done more than anyone expected." Hana was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Taemin, let me tell you something about human history. We've made many mistakes. We've fought terrible wars. We've hurt each other in ways that still haunt us. But we've also learned something important. We learned that the worst evil in the universe isn't cruelty or violence. It's indifference. It's having the power to help and choosing not to." She gestured to the damaged ship around them. "Every person on this vessel volunteered for this mission. They knew the risks. They came anyway because leaving you to die alone would be worse than any physical wound. Do you understand?" Taemin nodded slowly. "I think I'm beginning to." An alarm suddenly blared across the bridge. Bora's hands flew across her console. "Incoming transmission from the surface. It's one of our resistance groups. A grainy video feed appeared on the main screen. A Catharan resistance fighter spoke urgently. This is Ground Team 7. We've located a group of 300 civilians trapped in a collapsed shelter. Ravager forces are moving toward their position. We need immediate evacuation. Hana studied the tactical map. The shelter was deep in enemy-controlled territory. Any rescue attempt would be suicide. She looked at Bora, who met her eyes with understanding. Launch all remaining fighters, Hana ordered. Tell Jiho to prepare for ground support. Captain, one of the bridge officers protested. We need those fighters to defend the ship. If the Ravagers attack while they're gone, then we'll defend with what we have, Hana said firmly. Those are 300 lives. We're not abandoning them. In the fighter bay, Commander Jiho received his orders and felt a familiar mix of fear and determination. Marine Minji was still recovering from injuries sustained in the last boarding action. Her left arm was in a cast and medical had ordered her to rest. But when she heard about the rescue mission, she reported to the hangar bay in full combat gear. Minji, you're not cleared for duty, Jiho said when he saw her. I can still fight, Minji replied stubbornly. Those people need help. I'm going. Jiho wanted to argue, but he recognized that look in her eyes. It was the same look every human on this mission wore. The look that said some things mattered more than personal safety. He nodded and gestured to a transport shuttle. The rescue force descended through heavy fire. Ravager ground troops surrounded the collapsed shelter. Jiho's fighters strafed enemy positions, clearing a path for the transports. Minji and her Marines hit the ground running, weapons raised. The fighting was brutal and close. Ravager soldiers were bigger and stronger than humans, but the Marines fought with a ferocity that shocked their enemies. Minji, despite her injured arm, led her squad through enemy lines with tactical precision. Inside the collapsed shelter, Catharan civilians huddled in fear. They had heard the battle outside, not knowing if rescue was coming or if death had found them. Then human Marines broke through the debris, weapons ready, faces set with determination. Everyone stay calm, Minji announced in practiced Galactic common. We're here to get you out. Follow my Marines to the transports. Move quickly, but don't panic. The evacuation took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of humans holding defensive positions while civilians escaped. 12 minutes of human fighters diving through anti-aircraft fire to protect the transports. 12 minutes that felt like hours. When the last civilian was aboard, Minji counted her Marines. 2 were missing. She grabbed her radio. Sound off. Who's not accounted for? A weak voice responded. Private Kim and Private Lee were pinned down in Section 3. Go without us, negative, Minji said immediately. We don't leave our people behind. Hold position. I'm coming for you. She led a small team back into the combat zone, fighting through enemy positions with her good arm. They found the 2 Marines holding off 3 times their number. Minji's team provided covering fire, allowing everyone to fall back to the transports. The shuttles lifted off under heavy fire. One transport took a direct hit and went down, but the others made it to orbit. 300 civilians had been saved. The cost was 12 human wounded and 1 transport destroyed. Back on the horizon's edge, Taemin watched the rescued civilians being processed. Children clung to their parents. Elderly Catharans wept with relief, all of them alive because humans had risked everything to save strangers. A young Catharan woman approached Taemin. She had been in the shelter. Who are they? She asked, gesturing to the human crew. Why would they do this for us? Taemin thought about everything he had witnessed over the past 3 days. The courage, the sacrifice, the simple human belief that every life had value. He looked at the woman and said something he had never expected to say. They're humans, and apparently, that means something the rest of the galaxy has forgotten. On Cathera below, something remarkable was happening. Inspired by human courage, the Catharan people were finding their own strength. Resistance groups that had been hiding now fought openly. Scientists who had evacuated returned to share their knowledge. Civilians took up arms to defend their homes. The humans had shown them that survival was worth fighting for, that strangers could become allies. That courage was contagious. In the medical bay, Dr. Daehyun finally allowed himself a moment of rest. He looked at the beds around him, filled with humans and Catharans recovering side by side. Despite the exhaustion and pain, he smiled. This was why he had become a doctor, not to serve one species, but to heal anyone who needed help. Captain Hana stood on her damaged bridge, looking at the scarred planet below. The Ravagers would attack again soon. More lives would be lost, but she felt no regret about staying. Every civilian saved was worth the cost. Every moment of hope they provided to the Ketheran people justified the sacrifice. Bora approached her captain quietly. The crew wants you to know something. They would all make the same choice again. Every single one of them. Hana nodded, feeling pride in her people. They had come to Cathara as strangers. Now they fought as brothers and sisters, proving that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or technology. It was their unwavering belief that some things were worth dying for. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Cathara system. Captain Hana stood on her bridge studying the tactical display with cold focus. 30 Ravager warships surrounded the planet like predators circling wounded prey. The remaining Catharan defense ships were scattered and barely holding together. They've spotted us, Bora reported from her station. Ravagers are scanning our ships. They're probably laughing right now. Hana understood why. The human ships were tiny compared to the Ravager vessels. The Horizon's Edge was barely 1/3 the size of the smallest enemy ship. Their weapons were primitive. Their shields were weaker. On paper, this fight was already over. Open a channel to Taman, Hana ordered. The Ketharan diplomat's face appeared on screen. He looked exhausted and afraid, but his eyes lit up when he saw the human ships. Captain Hana, you actually came. I gave you my word, Hana said simply. Now I need information. How do the Ravagers fight? Taman pulled up data on his screen. They use overwhelming firepower and tight formations. They rely on their shields and armor to absorb damage while they destroy defenders with superior weapons. Most civilizations surrender when they see the Ravagers arrive. Those who fight usually die quickly. Tight formations, Bora muttered beside Hana. That's interesting. Hana nodded slowly. She had seen this before in Earth's history. An enemy so used to winning that they had forgotten how to adapt. The Ravagers had grown comfortable with their superiority. That comfort would be their weakness. What about boarding? Hana asked. Do the Ravagers expect enemies to board their ships? Taman looked confused. Boarding? No one boards enemy ships in modern warfare. It's too dangerous. Perfect, Hana said with a thin smile. Taman, keep your remaining ships close to the planet. Protect your people. We'll handle the Ravagers. But there are only 5 of you, Taman protested. How can you possibly? Watch and learn, Bora said, cutting off the transmission. Hana turned to her crew. All ships, this is Horizon's Edge. Execute pattern Delta 7. Jiho, your fighters are free to engage. Show them what human pilots can do. From the hangar bays of the human ships, small fighter craft launched into space. Commander Jiho led the squadron, his hands steady on the controls despite his racing heart. He had trained for combat his entire career, but this was different. This was real. All fighters, stay loose and keep moving, Jiho ordered. Remember your training. The Ravagers are bigger and stronger, but we're faster and smarter. The Ravagers opened fire first. Massive energy beams cut through space, targeting the human ships. But Hana had anticipated this. The human vessels scattered in unpredictable patterns, dodging and weaving in ways that confused the Ravager targeting systems. The enemy was used to opponents who maintained formation and fought with honor. Humans had no interest in honor. They were interested in winning. Jiho's fighter screamed past a Ravager warship, so close he could see the alien hull plating. He fired a missile at point-blank range, targeting the ship's communication array. The missile struck home, destroying the antenna in a burst of flame. The Ravager ship was now deaf and blind to its fleet. Target their sensors, Jiho shouted to his squadron. Make them fight alone. The human fighters swarmed the Ravager fleet like angry insects, too small and fast to hit reliably. They didn't try to destroy the massive warships. Instead, they crippled them, destroying sensors, weapons, and engines with surgical precision. Meanwhile, the Horizon's Edge charged directly at the center of the Ravager formation. Bora watched the tactical display with calculating eyes. They're moving to intercept us. Just like we predicted. Nari, are the modifications ready? Hana asked over the intercom. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Nari grinned wildly. She had spent the entire trip to Cathara modifying the ship's mining equipment. Humans had been mining asteroids for decades. They knew how to cut through rock and metal. Ravager hulls weren't that different. Ready, Captain, Nari replied. Let's see how they like industrial-grade cutting lasers. The Horizon's Edge dove between 2 Ravager ships. The modified mining lasers tore into their hulls. cutting deep wounds that vented atmosphere and disabled key systems. The Ravagers had shields designed to stop energy weapons and missiles. They weren't designed to stop cutting tools operated at knife-fighting range. Hard to port, Hana ordered. The ship turned sharply, narrowly avoiding return fire. Bora, target that command ship. The big one in the center. Captain, that's suicide, someone said from the crew stations. No, Hana corrected. It's unexpected. There's a difference. The Horizon's Edge accelerated toward the largest Ravager vessel. The command ship fired everything it had at the approaching human frigate. Hana's pilot threaded the ship through the barrage with impossible skill, dancing between energy beams that could have vaporized them instantly. Boarding pods away, Bora announced. Small pods shot from the Horizon's Edge, slamming into the Ravager command ship's hull. Inside each pod, human Marines prepared for close combat. They carried weapons designed for fighting in ships and stations, skills developed over centuries of naval warfare on Earth. The Ravagers had never experienced boarding before. Their ships had no internal defenses, no trained security forces. They were completely unprepared when human Marines cut through their hull and poured into their corridors. On the planet below, Taman watched the battle in amazement. The human ships moved like nothing he had ever seen. They broke every rule of civilized warfare. They attacked from unexpected angles. They used weapons in ways they weren't designed for. They boarded enemy ships like pirates from ancient stories. And it was working. The Ravager formation had dissolved into chaos. Ships collided with each other, trying to target the fast-moving human fighters. The command ship had gone dark, its systems sabotaged from within. 3 Ravager vessels had been disabled by the mining lasers. The rest were confused and disorganized. All Catharan ships, Taman transmitted to his remaining defense forces. The humans have broken their formation. Now is our chance. Attack! The Catharan ships, inspired by human courage, joined the battle with renewed energy. They had been fighting defensively, trying to survive. Now they fought to win. Inside the Ravager command ship, human Marines moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this kind of combat their entire lives. The Ravagers fought back with desperation, but they were soldiers designed for ship-to-ship warfare, not close-quarters battle. The Marines reached the bridge and placed explosive charges on the main computer system. They had no interest in capturing the ship. They just wanted to remove it from the battle. Charges set, the Marine commander reported. Evacuating now. The Marines retreated to their pods and launched back toward the human ships. Seconds later, the Ravager command ship systems exploded from within. The massive vessel went dark and began to drift. On the Horizon's Edge, Hana allowed herself a small smile. All ships, press the attack. Don't give them time to reorganize. The battle raged for 6 more hours. The humans lost 1 ship, destroyed by a lucky shot from a Ravager cruiser. But by the end, 8 Ravager vessels had been disabled or destroyed. The rest retreated to the system's edge, regrouping and trying to understand what had just happened. They had come to Cathara expecting easy prey. Instead, they had encountered something new and terrifying. An enemy that fought with creativity, aggression, and absolute fearlessness. An enemy that turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. They had encountered humans. Taman opened a channel to the Horizon's Edge. Captain Hana appeared on screen, looking tired but satisfied. Behind her, Bora was coordinating damage control and preparing for the next attack. That was incredible, Taman said, struggling to find adequate words. I've never seen anyone fight like that. That's because no one fights like humans, Hana replied. We've had a lot of practice. Our history is written in blood and fire. We know how to turn weakness into strength. Will they come back? Taman asked, looking at the retreating Ravager ships. Yes, Hana said with certainty. They won't accept this defeat. They'll regroup and attack with everything they have. She paused, then added, and we'll be ready. Get your people to safety, Taman. This was just round 1. The transmission ended. Across Cathara, the people celebrated their first victory, but Captain Hana knew the truth. The real battle was still coming, and when it did, humanity would show the galaxy what 5 small ships could do when defending the innocent. Taman stared at the communication screen with empty eyes. Another message. Another rejection. The Vorlan Empire had just declined their plea for help. That made 17 advanced civilizations who had received the distress call and chosen to ignore it. Outside the window of the diplomatic center, the sky burned orange. The Ravagers had broken through the third defense line an hour ago. Cathara was dying, and no one in the galaxy cared enough to help. Taman was young for a diplomat, barely 30 cycles old. His supervisor had chosen him for this task because of his skill with languages and his calm voice. Now he wondered if anyone could stay calm while watching their world end. His hands shook as he prepared the next transmission. The Galactic Council was his last hope. The council chamber appeared on his screen. Hundreds of species sat in their designated seats talking quietly among themselves. Taman had practiced this speech for days, but now the words felt hollow in his mouth. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "I speak to you from Cathara. Our world is under attack by the Ravagers. Our military forces are overwhelmed. We have tried to defend ourselves, but we cannot stand alone. We ask for your help. We beg for your help. Please. Our children are dying." The council members looked at each other. Some seemed uncomfortable. Others appeared bored. The head counselor, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, spoke in a measured tone. "We understand your situation is difficult," the counselor said. "However, military intervention requires extensive planning and resource allocation. We must consider the cost and risk to our own people. The council will debate this matter and reach a decision in due time." "How much time?" Taman asked, desperation bleeding into his voice. "How long will your debate take?" "These matters cannot be rushed. Perhaps 2 or 3 weeks, and we don't have 2 weeks." Taman shouted, forgetting protocol. "We have days. Maybe hours." The counselor's expression remained neutral. "Then I suggest you focus on evacuation rather than defense. The council cannot be pressured into hasty action. This meeting is concluded." The screen went dark. Taman sat in silence, feeling the weight of failure crushing him. He had done everything right, followed every diplomatic procedure, appealed to logic and emotion. None of it mattered. The galaxy had rules and processes, and those rules moved slower than death. An explosion shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. The Ravagers were getting closer. Taman looked at the list of civilizations on his screen. Every major power had been contacted. Everyone had refused or delayed. There was no one left to call. Wait, there was one entry he had overlooked. A small notation at the bottom of the database. A recent addition to the Galactic Communication Network. The species called themselves humans. Their planet was named Earth. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 5 years ago. The database listed them as primitive, aggressive, and politically fractured. Taman almost laughed. What could a species that barely understood space travel do against the Ravagers? But then again, what did he have to lose? He prepared the transmission and sent it into the void, not expecting any response. 2 hours later, his screen blinked. An incoming message from an unknown source. Taman's heart jumped. He opened the transmission. A woman's face appeared on the screen. She had dark hair pulled back tightly and sharp, intelligent eyes. Behind her, Taman could see what looked like a ship's bridge. The woman wore a military uniform with symbols he didn't recognize. "This is Captain Hana of the Earth frigate Horizon's Edge," the woman said in clear, precise galactic common. "We received your distress call. What is your current situation?" Taman blinked in surprise. You're responding, but your species is barely spacefaring. The Ravagers have ships that could destroy your entire fleet." Captain Hana's expression didn't change. "You didn't ask about our capabilities. You asked for help. Now I'll ask again. What is your current situation?" Taman quickly explained the situation. The Ravagers had surrounded Cathara with 30 warships. The planet's defense fleet had been reduced to scattered resistance. The main cities were under constant bombardment. Evacuation was impossible because the Ravagers were destroying any ship that tried to leave orbit. Captain Hana listened without interrupting. When Taman finished, she turned to someone off-screen.
"Bora, what's our ETA?"
A second voice responded. 18 hours if we push the engines hard." "Push them," Hana said. She looked back at Taman. "We're bringing 5 ships. It's all Earth could spare on short notice. I won't lie to you. Our technology is less advanced than the Ravagers. Our ships are smaller. But we're coming." Taman felt something he hadn't felt in days. Hope. It was small and fragile, but it was real. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why would you risk your people for strangers?" Captain Hana was quiet for a moment. "Because someone has to," she said finally. "Because we've read your history and ours. And we know what it's like when no one comes to help. Because it's the right thing to do. She leaned forward slightly. Hold your position, Taman. Help is coming. I promise you that. The transmission ended. Taman sat in stunned silence. Then he began to laugh. It was a strange, slightly hysterical sound. A species that had barely left their own star system was coming to fight an enemy that terrified the entire galaxy. It was insane. It was impossible. It was the only hope they had. Taman sent an emergency broadcast to all Ketharan military channels. This is Diplomatic Officer Taman. Reinforcements are incoming. Human ships will arrive in 18 hours. All units, hold your positions. Help is coming. The response was immediate and confused. Humans? One commander asked. Who are the humans? I don't know, Taman admitted. But they're the only ones who answered our call. Across Cathara, exhausted soldiers heard the message. Most didn't know what to think. Some assumed it was a mistake or a cruel joke. But a few, like Taman, felt that small spark of hope beginning to grow. In orbit above Cathara, the Ravager fleet continued its methodical destruction. They had done this many times before. Send a message of overwhelming force. Watch the defenders crumble. Take what they wanted from the ruins. It always worked the same way. But this time would be different. Racing through the darkness of space, 5 small ships pushed their engines beyond safe limits. Inside the horizon's edge, Captain Hana stood on her bridge and studied the tactical display. Her second-in-command, Bora, stood beside her. 5 ships against 30, Bora said quietly. These are not good odds. No, Hana agreed. But good odds never made history. She looked at her crew, seeing the determination in their faces. They all knew what they were flying toward. They all came anyway. All hands, Hana announced over the ship-wide communication system. This is the captain. We're heading into a fight we're not supposed to win. The Ravagers are bigger, stronger, and more advanced than we are, but they've never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of when we're defending innocent people. Show them what Earth sends to bullies. Show them why you don't start fights with humanity. The crew responded with a roar of approval. The Horizon's Edge and its sister ships continued toward Cathara, carrying with them something the galaxy had forgotten. The willingness to fight for strangers, the courage to stand against impossible odds, the simple human belief that some things are worth dying for.